The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the backyard as smoke rose from the grill. Laughter and chatter filled the air, but none of it was friendly, at least not toward him. He stood quietly near the fence, holding a paper plate with a half-eaten burger, watching his wife's family celebrate another successful quarter at Chen Industries. "Look at him, just standing there like a statue," his brother-in-law called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "What's the matter? Too tired from doing nothing all day?" The group erupted in laughter. His wife, seated at the picnic table with her mother and sisters, didn't defend him. She never did. Instead, she rolled her eyes and took another sip of her wine. "I don't understand what my daughter saw in you," his mother-in-law said, her voice dripping with disdain. "No job, no ambition, just sitting at home all day playing on that computer. You're 35 years old, for heaven's sake." He remained silent, as he always did during these gatherings. There was no point in explaining. They wouldn't believe him anyway. How could he tell them that the playing on the computer was actually managing a multi-billion-dollar investment portfolio? That the reason he didn't go to an office was because he didn't need to? His father-in-law, a regional manager at Chen Industries, stood up with his chest puffed out. "You know, son, I could probably get you a job in the mailroom. It's not much, but at least you'd be earning something. Contributing to society. Being a man." "He's too proud for that," his wife interjected, her voice sharp. "He thinks he's above working a real job. Always with his investments and business dealings that nobody ever sees." "What investments?" her sister chimed in. "The man doesn't even have a car. He drives that beat-up old sedan that should have been junked 5 years ago." They didn't know that the sedan had sentimental value. It was the first thing he'd bought himself when he was 18, before his software startup had sold for $800 million. Before he'd taken that money and quietly bought controlling shares in dozens of companies, including the one where his wife's entire family worked. He'd kept it all hidden for a reason. When he met his wife 6 years ago, she'd seemed different, kind, genuine, not interested in money. He'd wanted to be loved for himself, not his bank account. So he'd posed as a simple programmer, living modestly, never revealing his true wealth. Even after they married, he maintained a facade, thinking that eventually he'd tell her the truth when the time was right. But the time had never been right. Her family's contempt had grown with each passing year, and she'd grown colder, more distant, more ashamed of him. The woman he'd fallen in love with had disappeared, replaced by someone who cared more about status and appearances than the man she'd promised to love. "You know what your problem is," his brother-in-law continued, emboldened by the alcohol and the supportive audience. "You're a leech. You live off my sister's salary, contribute nothing, and have the audacity to show up here and eat our food." "That's enough," he said quietly. It was the first time he'd spoken in an hour. "Oh, he speaks," the brother-in-law mocked. "What are you going to do? Finally stand up for yourself." His wife suddenly stood up, her face flushed with anger, but not at her family. She walked toward the house and returned moments later with a bucket. The dirty mop water inside sloshed as she carried it. "You want to know what I think?" she said, her voice trembling with rage. "I think I've wasted 6 years of my life on a man who will never amount to anything. I'm done being embarrassed. I'm done making excuses for you." Before he could react, she lifted the bucket and dumped the entire contents over his head. The cold, filthy water soaked through his clothes, smelling of chemicals and grime. The crowd gasped, then burst into laughter and applause. He stood there, dripping, looking at the woman he'd once loved. Her face showed no remorse, only satisfaction. "Pack your things," she said coldly. "I want you gone by tonight." He wiped the dirty water from his eyes and smiled, a small, knowing smile that none of them understood. "As you wish," he said calmly. "I'll see you all Monday morning." The cryptic comment went unnoticed as he turned and walked toward the house. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp, clear weather that promised a perfect day. For most of the family, it started like any other workday. Coffee, traffic, the familiar walk through the chrome and glass entrance of Chen Industries' corporate headquarters. What they didn't know was that at 6:47 a.m., an emergency email had been sent to specific employees: his wife, her father, mother, brother-in-law, and 2 sisters. The subject line read simply, "Mandatory meeting, HR, 9 a.m. attendance required." His father-in-law was the first to arrive at the human resources floor, confused and slightly worried. In 30 years with the company, he'd never been summoned to HR like this. His wife arrived minutes later, still smug from the weekend's events, though a flicker of concern crossed her face when she saw her father's expression. One by one, the family assembled in the waiting area outside the main conference room. The HR director, Mrs. Patricia Walsh, a stern woman in her 50s, greeted them with an unreadable expression. "Please, come in and have a seat," she said, holding the door open. The conference room was larger than necessary for 6 people. A massive oak table dominated the space, and at the far end sat an executive chair, turned away from them, facing the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. "What's this about?" his father-in-law demanded. "I have a department to run." "All in due time," Mrs. Walsh replied, taking her seat on one side of the table. Next to her sat the company's legal counsel and the chief operating officer. His wife shifted uncomfortably. "Is this about performance reviews? Because my numbers have been excellent this quarter." "This meeting concerns all of you collectively," the COO said, his expression grave. "There have been serious allegations regarding workplace conduct, hostile environment creation, and—" "That's ridiculous," the brother-in-law interrupted. "We're some of the best employees here. I don't know what this is about, but—" The executive chair slowly swiveled around. There he sat, wearing an immaculate charcoal suit that probably cost more than their monthly salaries combined. His hair was professionally styled, his presence commanding in a way they'd never seen before. But it was unmistakably him, the man they'd humiliated, the useless husband, the jobless leech. The room fell into stunned silence. "Hello," he said calmly, folding his hands on the table. "I don't believe we've been properly introduced. My name is Alexander Thorne, and I am the majority shareholder of Chen Industries. I own 58% of this company." His wife's face went white. Her father looked like he might have a heart attack. The siblings seemed frozen, unable to process what they were hearing. That's impossible," his wife stammered. "You're nobody. I'm the man you dumped dirty mop water on Saturday," he continued, his voice never rising but carrying absolute authority. "In front of 20 witnesses. After 6 years of verbal abuse, belittlement, and humiliation from you and your family." He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. The large monitor on the wall flickered to life, showing a video of Saturday's cookout. They watched in horror as the scene replayed, the mocking, the laughter, and finally, his wife dumping the bucket over his head. "I've tolerated a lot over the years," Alexander continued. "I chose to live modestly, to hide my wealth, because I wanted to be loved for who I am, not what I have. That was my mistake. I gave you every opportunity to show kindness, compassion, basic human decency. Instead, you chose cruelty." "Alexander, please," his wife said, her voice breaking. "I didn't know. If I had known." "If you had known, you would have treated me differently," he finished. "Which proves exactly who you are. You don't love people. You love status. You love money. You love what people can do for you." Her father found his voice, though it shook. "Son, there must be some misunderstanding. We can work this out. Family is family." "Family." Alexander's laugh was bitter. "You called me a leech. You suggested I work in the mailroom out of pity. Your wife said I was a waste of space. Your son called me a parasite. That's not family. That's systematic abuse." He turned to Mrs. Walsh. "Please proceed with the documentation." Mrs. Walsh slid folders across the table to each family member. Inside, you'll find the results of a comprehensive investigation into workplace behavior, including multiple complaints from other employees about hostile environment, nepotism, and abuse of position. "This is revenge," the brother-in-law shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "You're making this up because your feelings got hurt." Actually, the legal counsel interjected, these complaints were filed over the past 18 months by 14 different employees. Mr. Thorne only became aware of them last week when he requested a full audit of all HR reports. Alexander stood, buttoning his suit jacket. I'm not a cruel man, despite what you might think. You're not being fired, yet. But there will be consequences. You're all being placed on formal probation. Your performances will be monitored closely. Any further violations will result in immediate termination. He paused at the door, looking at his wife one last time. And regarding our marriage, you'll be hearing from my attorney. The divorce papers should arrive by Wednesday. As he left, the room erupted in chaos, his wife sobbing, her father arguing, her siblings in shock. But Alexander didn't look back. For the first time in 6 years, he felt free. The news spread through Chen Industries like wildfire. By lunch, everyone knew that the quiet, unemployed husband of the sales director was actually Alexander Thorne, the mysterious majority shareholder whose name had been buried in complex corporate documents and offshore holding companies. Alexander sat in his newly occupied executive office on the 4th to 5th floor, an office that had been kept ready for him for years but that he'd never bothered to use. His assistant, Jennifer, a competent woman in her 40s who'd been managing his affairs remotely, stood before his desk with a tablet full of urgent matters. The press is starting to ask questions, she said. Business reporters want to know why the reclusive Thorne is suddenly making public appearances. And your wife has been trying to reach you. She's called 17 times this morning. Block her number, Alexander said, reviewing a financial report. And prepare a statement for the press. Alexander Thorne is taking a more active role in company operations to ensure Chen Industries continues its commitment to excellence and ethical workplace culture. Nothing more. Sir, there's something else, Jennifer hesitated. Your father-in-law has been making calls. He's telling people you're mentally unstable, that you're lying about your identity, that this is some kind of elaborate fraud. Alexander smiled grimly. Let him talk. Truth has a way of surfacing. What's the status on the audit I requested? The forensic accountants have found several irregularities. It appears your father-in-law has been approving excessive expense reports for family members, including personal purchases charged to company accounts. Your brother-in-law has been using his position to steer contracts to companies owned by his friends in exchange for kickbacks. And your wife? Go on, Alexander said quietly. She's been having an affair with the VP of Marketing, Daniel Torres. For approximately 8 months. There are emails, hotel receipts charged to company accounts, the works. The word should have hurt, but Alexander felt only a cold numbness. In a way, it made sense. It explained the growing distance, the increased hostility, the rush to humiliate him publicly. She'd been building a narrative, justifying her betrayal by painting him as worthless. Does Torres know who I am? Alexander asked. As of 2 hours ago, yes. He submitted his resignation immediately. I have it here. Jennifer handed him a letter. Don't accept it. Not yet. I want to speak with him first. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Walsh entered, looking troubled. Mr. Thorne, we have a situation. Your wife is in the lobby. Security won't let her up, but she's causing a scene. She's claiming you've kidnapped her husband and that she demands to see him. Alexander stood and walked to the window, looking down at the city below. Tell security to escort her to conference room B. I'll meet with her. But Jennifer, I want you there as a witness, along with Mrs. Walsh and our legal counsel. 20 minutes later, Alexander entered the conference room. His wife stood by the window, her makeup smeared from crying, her professional demeanor completely shattered. When she saw him, she rushed forward. Alexander, please, we need to talk privately. This is between us. You can't do this. Sit down, he said quietly. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. She sat, realizing that begging wouldn't work. Her expression shifted, calculating. I've hired an attorney. You can't just divorce me and walk away. I'm entitled to half of everything. 6 years of marriage means. You signed a prenuptial agreement, Alexander interrupted. Do you remember? You said it was romantic that I'd insisted on one, that it proved I loved you for you, not your money. Of course, you thought I had nothing to protect. Her face paled. That agreement is null and void if you've been hiding assets. Fraud invalidates. I didn't hide assets. I simply didn't advertise them. There's a difference. Every question you asked me, I answered truthfully. You asked if I was a programmer. I am. I wrote the code that formed the basis of my first company. You asked if I had investments. I do. You simply never asked the right questions because you never cared enough to really know me. This is insane, she said, her voice rising. You lived like a poor person. You drove a junk car. You wore cheap clothes. What was I supposed to think? You were supposed to love me, Alexander said simply. Not my bank account. Not my status. Me. And when times were hard, when your family mocked me, you were supposed to stand by me. Instead, you joined them. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'll change. We can start over. I'll stand up to my family. You're sorry you got caught, Alexander corrected. You're sorry that the man you thought was beneath you turned out to be above you. And you're sorry that your affair with Daniel Torres is now documented evidence in divorce proceedings. She froze. How did you? I own the company. Did you really think you could conduct an affair using company resources and I wouldn't find out? 8 months. You've been betraying me for 8 months while treating me like garbage in public. Tears streamed down her face, but Alexander felt nothing. The woman he'd loved was gone, maybe she'd never existed at all. Here's what's going to happen, he said. You'll receive exactly what the prenuptial agreement stipulates, $50,000 and whatever personal possessions you brought into the marriage. The house is mine, I bought it before we met. The car you drive is technically a company vehicle, so you'll return it. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. That's not fair, she screamed. I gave you 6 years. You gave me 6 years of contempt, Alexander replied. Be grateful I'm being this generous. Mrs. Walsh, please escort her out. As security led his hysterical wife from the building, Jennifer approached Alexander carefully. Sir, are you all right? Alexander straightened his tie, his face unreadable. I will be. Get me everything on the VP of Marketing. I want to know exactly what he knew and when. And Jennifer, start looking for replacements for the regional manager position. I have a feeling there will be an opening soon. By Wednesday, Alexander's identity was no longer a secret. Business publications ran stories about the phantom billionaire who'd been hiding in plain sight, and social media erupted with speculation about his motives. Some portrayed him as vindictive, others saw him as a victim finally claiming his power. Alexander ignored it all. He had work to do. Daniel Torres sat in the same conference room where the family had been confronted, his expensive suit unable to hide the sweat beading on his forehead. At 38, Torres had built a reputation as a charismatic marketing genius, climbing the corporate ladder through charm and strategic networking. Now, face to face with the man whose wife he'd been sleeping with, that charm had evaporated. I submitted my resignation, Torres said immediately. I'll leave quietly. No severance necessary. Just, please, I have a family. Don't destroy my career. Alexander sat across from him, his expression neutral. Tell me, Daniel, did you know who I was? Not until Monday. I swear. She always said. She said you were nobody. A house husband. Someone she was planning to divorce anyway. Torres's words tumbled out desperately. I never would have, I mean, if I'd known. If you'd known I was wealthy, you wouldn't have touched her. Alexander finished. How noble of you. Torres flinched. That's not what I meant. But it's what you said. Tell me something else, Daniel. In your 8 months with my wife, did she ever speak about me with kindness? Did she ever express guilt? Or did she paint me as the villain in her story? Torres hesitated, then nodded slowly. She said you were holding her back. That you were lazy, unmotivated. That she deserved better. She made it sound like she was trapped. And you believed her? You never thought to question why a woman would stay married to someone she despised? Never wondered if there might be another side to the story? I didn't think about it, Torres admitted. You just took what you wanted without caring about the consequences, Alexander said. Here's the truth, Daniel. You're a good marketer. Your campaigns have increased our brand recognition by 32% in the past 2 years. I don't actually want to lose you. Torres looked up, surprised. You don't. No. But I also can't have someone in leadership who lacks integrity. So here's your choice. You can resign and take your chances in the job market, where this scandal will inevitably follow you. Or you can stay, accept a demotion to senior consultant with a 20% pay cut, and spend the next year proving that you're capable of making ethical decisions. I'll stay, Torres said immediately. Thank you. I won't let you. Don't thank me, Alexander interrupted. And understand this. You get one chance. 1. If you violate company policy, if you so much as bend a rule, you're finished. Not just here, but everywhere I have influence. Are we clear? Crystal clear, sir. After Torres left, Alexander pulled out his phone and called his attorney, Richard Morrison, a silver-haired legal shark who'd been handling Alexander's affairs for 15 years. Richard, tell me about the family situation. It's a mess, Alexander, Morrison said bluntly. Your wife is threatening to go to the media, claiming you're using your wealth to bully her. Her lawyer is arguing that the prenup was signed under false pretenses. And her father is filing a complaint with the Labor Board claiming wrongful probation. Can any of it stick? No. The prenup is ironclad, you disclosed your occupation truthfully, and the probation is backed by documented HR violations. But it'll be ugly. They're going to make a lot of noise. Let them, Alexander said. Sometimes the truth needs to be loud. I'm done hiding. What about the forensic audit? That's where things get interesting. Your father-in-law has embezzled approximately $200,000 over 5 years through false expense reports and ghost contractors. Your brother-in-law's kickback scheme is worth about $500,000. It's criminal fraud, Alexander. You could press charges. Alexander was quiet for a moment. What would you recommend? Personally, I'd prosecute. They've committed crimes. But I know you, and I know you're not vindictive despite what they put you through. So here's the middle ground. Give them the option to resign immediately and repay every cent, or face criminal charges. Let them choose their fate. Do it. Send the offer through their attorneys. They have 48 hours to decide. That evening, Alexander returned to the house he'd shared with his wife, a modern, minimalist home in an upscale neighborhood that he'd purchased under an LLC to maintain privacy. She wasn't there. She'd moved in with her sister after Monday's confrontation. The house felt empty but peaceful. He poured himself a drink and stood on the back deck, looking at the city lights in the distance. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You've ruined my life. I hope you're happy. He deleted it without responding. Then another. My family is falling apart because of you. And another. Please. Can we just talk? I'll do anything. Alexander blocked the number, then called Jennifer. Someone is giving my wife my personal number. Find out who and handle it. Already on it, sir. It was her sister, who got it from someone in IT. He's being terminated tomorrow. Good. Jennifer, I want you to do something else for me. Research the best divorce attorneys in the state who specialize in helping women leaving abusive relationships. Provide my wife with a list and offer to pay for her legal representation. Jennifer was silent for a moment. Sir, she's already hired an attorney to fight you. I know. But she'll need a different kind of attorney when this is over, one to help her move forward, not fight backward. She's going to need therapy too. Set up a fund. $500,000. She can use it for counseling, education, whatever she needs to rebuild. But it comes with one condition: she stays out of my life completely. That's very generous, sir. After everything she's done. I'm not doing it for her, Alexander said quietly. I'm doing it so I can move on without guilt. She's going to face consequences for her choices, but I don't want her destroyed. I just want her gone. As he ended the call, Alexander realized something. For the first time in years, he felt like himself again. 3 months later, Chen Industries held its quarterly board meeting. Alexander sat at the head of the table, flanked by Jennifer and the newly appointed Chief Operating Officer, Maria Chen, the founder's granddaughter who'd been working her way up through the company's international division. Revenue is up 18%, Maria reported. Employee satisfaction scores have increased significantly since the ethics review and policy changes. We've had some turnover, but we're attracting top talent again. Alexander nodded. The changes had been necessary but painful. His father-in-law had chosen resignation and repayment rather than prosecution, as had his brother-in-law. Both were now working in low-level positions at competitor firms, their reputations tarnished but not destroyed. His sisters-in-law had survived the scandal with formal reprimands, having been less involved in the corruption. One had since quit to pursue another opportunity. The other had become a model employee, apparently taking the wake-up call seriously. His wife, ex-wife, as of 2 weeks ago when the divorce was finalized, had taken the settlement offer. She'd moved to another city and, according to the reports Jennifer quietly provided, was in therapy and taking business courses at a community college. She'd made no further attempts to contact him. There's one more item, Maria said, pulling up a presentation. The Henderson Project. We've been approached about a major merger that could expand our international presence by 40%. But it would require significant restructuring. For the next hour, the board debated the pros and cons. Alexander listened carefully, asking questions, considering all angles. This was who he really was, not the silent victim being mocked at family cookouts, but a strategic thinker who'd built an empire through careful investment and calculated risks. When the meeting ended, Maria approached him. Can I speak with you privately? They walked to his office, and she settled into one of the leather chairs across from his desk. I want to thank you, she said, for what you did. Not just for yourself, but for the company. My grandfather built this place on integrity, and it had started to rot from within. You cleaned house without destroying it. I didn't do it alone, Alexander replied. And I didn't do it perfectly. I should have revealed myself years ago, should have addressed the problems instead of hiding from them. Maybe, Maria agreed. But you're here now. That's what matters. So what's next for the mysterious Alexander Thorne? Now that everyone knows who you are. Alexander smiled. I'm going to do something I should have done a long time ago, live authentically. No more hiding, no more tests, no more pretending to be less than I am. Does that mean you're staying on as active CEO? Or going back into the shadows? Neither. I'm going to find a middle path. I'll remain involved, but I'm also going to travel, pursue some projects I've been putting off, maybe even have a personal life that isn't a complete disaster. Maria laughed. Good luck with that last part. But seriously, Alexander, what you went through, it would have broken most people. Instead, you turned it into transformation. That takes real strength. After she left, Alexander stood at his window, looking down at the city. His phone buzzed with a notification from his dating app. He'd finally set one up at Jennifer's insistence. A message from a teacher named Sarah who shared his love of old cars and obscure philosophy texts. He smiled and typed a response, keeping it simple and honest. No pretending, no hiding, just genuine human connection. That evening, he drove his old sedan, the one his wife's family had mocked, to a small Italian restaurant. Sarah was already there, sitting at a corner table, reading a worn paperback. She looked up when he approached, her smile warm and genuine. You must be Alexander, she said, standing to shake his hand. Fair warning, I Googled you after we matched. That's quite a story. He winced. I was hoping we could start fresh, without all that. We can, she said, sitting back down. But I'm glad I know. Not because of the money, I couldn't care less about that. But because it tells me you're someone who values authenticity enough to risk everything for it. That's rare. They talked for hours, about books, philosophy, their completely different childhoods, their shared love of terrible sci-fi movies. She was a high school English teacher who spent her summers volunteering at literacy programs. She drove a 10-year-old Honda and lived in a modest apartment with 2 rescue cats named after Victorian poets. She was real, genuine, unpretentious, everything his ex-wife had pretended to be. When the check came, Alexander reached for it, but Sarah held up her hand. "Let's split it. I'm old-fashioned that way. I like equality right from the start." "I'd like that," Alexander said, meaning it. As they walked to their cars, Sarah turned to him. "So, second date? Fair warning, I'm not impressed by expensive restaurants or fancy gifts. But I do love miniature golf and terrible wine." Alexander laughed, genuinely laughed, for the first time in months. "That sounds perfect." Driving home, he passed the building where his ex-wife's family had worked, where they'd built their petty kingdom of nepotism and cruelty. The lights were still on in some offices, people working late, pursuing their ambitions. He felt no anger toward them anymore, no need for further revenge. They'd faced consequences for their actions, learned harsh lessons, and now they had to live with their choices. His father-in-law would never reach the executive level he'd dreamed of. His brother-in-law's reputation was permanently damaged. His ex-wife had lost the comfortable life she'd taken for granted. But more than that, they'd lost something more valuable, the chance to truly know someone remarkable. They'd had 6 years to see past appearances, to value character over status, to recognize that worth isn't measured by job titles or flashy cars. They'd failed that test spectacularly. As for Alexander, he'd learned his own lessons. Hiding who you are to test people's love doesn't work, it just creates misunderstandings and resentment. Authenticity matters, even when it's risky. And the right people will love you for who you truly are, not what you can provide them. He pulled into his driveway and sat for a moment, looking at his house, his real house, not the facade he'd maintained for years. Tomorrow, he'd call his architect and finally do that renovation he'd been planning. Maybe add a home theater, definitely upgrade the garage for his growing collection of classic cars. He was done living small to make others comfortable. His phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. "Thanks for a great evening. Looking forward to miniature golf. I should warn you, I'm undefeated in windmill holes." Alexander smiled and typed back, "Challenge accepted. Loser buys the terrible wine." As he entered his house, Alexander realized something profound. Revenge hadn't healed him. Consequences for his abusers hadn't healed him. Even the divorce and fresh start hadn't healed him. What healed him was choosing to live authentically, to value himself enough to demand respect, and to believe he deserved better than what he'd accepted for so long. The story of the useless husband who owned the company was already becoming corporate legend, whispered in break rooms and shared on social media. But that wasn't his story anymore. His story was just beginning, not as a victim or a villain, not as a secret billionaire or a hidden powerhouse, but simply as Alexander Thorne, a man who'd learned to value himself enough to walk away from people who didn't. And that, he realized, was the real victory.